there is a sense of optimism. The financial crisis was tough. Regulators took the right measures in order to, bring macroeconomic stability. We were able to successfully secure economic and financial support to allow us to transform fundamentally our economy. The policy rate has now come down to half. Inflation, has been effectively managed. You see the reflection in the stock market. You see investors coming back. You see things moving. I think when you look at the years of the crisis, you also saw that the savior as far as GDP was concerned was agri. When I looked at basically the last year, there have been challenges because of crop failures and some of the issues on that. But on the other hand, when we look at manufacturing, we see now recovery coming in. And particularly, I think the SME sector, which is really the bulk of what is there in terms of employment outside of agri, is now showing a healthy increase. And large-scale manufacturing, which actually was flat, at least the demand is starting to pick up. Primarily, you have real estate coming back a little bit. You have other opportunities coming in. I think what is also very exciting is, and you mentioned that, is the renewed interest now that countries have. And that's primarily because all three rating agencies have upgraded Pakistan risk. That has really unlocked a fair amount of interest. And we see a lot of activity that will happen as global investors are looking at markets where they can be reasonable amount of returns. I think there's a lot of players that really want to invest for the long haul. So when we start looking at the mining sector, when we look at gems and minerals, there is a lot of interest to do this for the long haul. Pakistan still hasn't fully tapped into what could potentially be in terms of oil and gas as much as we should. So I think that's another opportunity that is out there. There is renewed interest in terms of the SOEs and offloading of that, which will further improve the scenario. Despite last year agri being bad, that's actually going to further increase the importance of putting this on the map, because quite frankly, the GDP contribution of agri and agri-based SMEs, is typically around 40%, and it's about a 33% employment. So that's where, I think is internally the opportunity. I think more and more simple financing is no longer enough. The real value is unlocked when you're able to provide them with all the inputs. You're able to provide the small farmers with agronomist support as well as mechanized equipment, and be able to help them in terms of the offtake of the crop. That's where the opportunity is. And then it's really about partnering with that entire supply chain, farm to fork, where you can actually move agri from a baseline export of the basic output with some level of processing to really something which can straight away go on the supermarket shelf. And globally, where people have been able to do that, there's typically a 5 to 6x times more margin that you can make if you're doing these value-added exports. Typically, the economy's growth is based on consumption, right? So we do have to somehow pivot it, to an value-added export base. And it's very heartening to see in the recent tax measures that the ministries and the government, Ministry of Finance, has taken is really to start to encourage that pivot and moving. And one of the ways is that you start looking at where imports are subsidized and there is an unfair advantage because, in economics, there's an infant industry option that is there, that if you're setting up a new industry, you're going to have to support it in its infancy before it's good. But there has to be a path for that. It can't be 20 years. So I think that's where now, there are additional opportunities that will allow the focus and the flow of capital investments in mechanization, digitization, automation towards value-added exports. Digitization. And that's where, when we start looking at the formal economy and the informal, I think the more we digitize, one is it unlocks convenience and value. The second is it naturally pivots towards getting a more formalized economy out there. There are certain things which are right now emerging that we need to be better understanding of and see how we take them forward. So whether we talk about CBDCs or central bank digital currencies, right? Or we talk about cryptocurrencies and crypto mining. I think that's a relatively new area for the formal sector. There is a separate legal entity that has been set up to supervise it. And there will be opportunities that will come out of it. So I think staying close to understanding it and taking it forward is going to be important. The other value of tokenization would be to unlock a lot of value for the capital market, both on the fixed income as well as the equity side. So if you can take large, for example, we typically talk about real estate assets, as rent seeking. But if you're able to fractionalize them, in a better way, there are some REITs and others, the mechanisms. But if you're able to make it, much more retail oriented, I think it provides another lucrative savings channel that allows us to improve the savings rate for the country. And it also allows the unlocking, and the development of the capital market as well. There is conversations around population growth. The other implication is the youth bulge. So right now, we are fortunate Pakistan has a young population. How do we put that to gainful use? And that really, there are certain schemes I think that the government is starting. Um, we need to do more of those, which is equipping them with the right skill sets to be exportable, because the days of, a basic individual going as labor are gone. Now, even a laborer needs to be able to understand how to operate, sophisticated equipment and techniques, be able to manage those even in basic construction roles. If you're a plumber, you need to be certified. If you're an electrician, you need to be certified. So that's the kind of world that we're getting into. So at least let's start to pivot towards that. And again, there are some early signs. So at least I think it's out there as a priority, but it has to be done with a sense of urgency, because these things, will continue to put more stress on the resources that we have if we don't sort of address them in a timely fashion. The awareness is there in the center. We recently had the launch of the V Code, and which is Women Entrepreneurial Code, and basically almost all the banks were there from a awareness perspective, from a public show of commitment perspective. The industry is already there. What is important is translation of that intent into tangible. And women's empowerment doesn't mean I've opened an account for them, right? It's about, how many have I financed, what have I financed, and like I said, on our microfinance bank side, 1/3 of that is females. The one thing that we need to also look at better as an industry is going to be going a little upstream on the problem, and that would be around, you know many of the females in Pakistan don't even know where to start, what to do, and how do we, help create that knowledge and that awareness. And I think that's going to be a collective challenge for us, to work through. So it is clearly a challenge, and some grassroots efforts for the long term. Because again, if we take a lens of 3 years, 5 years, let's start doing some basics so that by that time we have a lot more critical mass as an industry.